Can you please call the hearing number for the record?
This is Commission Hearing number 23 of Wednesday, 6th November 2019, in the case of 005 Carlette Ball, 009 Jimmy Zatt, 0049 Hester Grizzle, case 0058 Marina Pool.
Thank you. Before we call the first witness, I just want to address one issue that's been brought to my attention, and that is concerned that yesterday when the Commission was speaking with ex-President Michel, it was calling him President Michel. I would just like to clarify that it is international protocol, that the Commission checked with State House as to the correct address for Mr. Michel and were advised that he should be called President Michel. The Commission thinks it's important that it follow protocol during its proceedings. So I hope I've clarified why we were addressing him as President Michel, and that people can appreciate that that was a necessary and right thing for the Commission to do. Can you please call the next witness? Thank you.
Mrs. Carlette Ball.
Thank you, Mrs. Ball, for appearing before us today, and your son has come as well. Thank you for coming. You've both been sworn, so you are probably joint complainants in this case. So the Commission invites you to take your time in setting out your complaint. If you need to adjourn at any time, we can adjourn. We're happy to accommodate you, but we would like to hear your story.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And feel free to use Creole. Thank you. Can we have another glass? And oh, thank you.
Hi, my name is Carlette Ball. I was born in the Toll family at Saint Louis. I am one of the 10 children of my late mother and Antoine Toll. I was a school teacher at St. Teresa's and later joined the St. John Bosco's in my younger days. A profession which I found very fulfilling and has such good memories for me. I met Hassan around 1960 whilst watching a film of Swiss Family Robinson at the Sir John Thorpe Hall located in Victoria. Maybe you remember that. We went on to have 4 children together, not on the same day, of which my second was stillborn. We were together for 17 years. On the 5th of June 1977, the morning of Sunday, the 5th of June, we awoke to the news of the coup in the Seychelles. Later in the afternoon, a car pulled up outside our house at La Louise and was given by a friend of ours. Am I allowed to mention names?
Yes, you can mention names as long as you're not making accusations.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
no,
that's fine, yeah.
My friend and ours, Mr. Bill Mohammed, who was one of also the President Montcalm's bodyguard then. With him was a guy with an AK-47 by the name of Sok, who approached Hassan and asked him for money. Hassan borrowed some money from our local keeper next door to give him. I asked Bill if he needed something to eat. He said yes. I went indoors and I prepared a piece of bread for him and some water. On the 13th of August, 1977, that day, my sister Juliana, which you've met, had asked to borrow our car, and at around 6 p.m., Hassan left home to take the car from La Louise to Saint Louis, where my family lived. A journey that should have taken 15 minutes, not more, especially being in sort of nighttime. After half an hour, Hassan had left. I got a call from my sister Juliana asking on the whereabout of Hassan. I replied that he left over half an hour ago, so should have been with you by now. Upon hearing that, Juliana went looking for him, and after a short walk down the road, she came across the car with a door wide open. She called me back and relayed the news, and I had a feeling something had happened. A good friend of the family sent his son to collect us and drive us back to Saint Louis, where my parents lived. They stopped, and while going down, I stopped at Hassan's family and told them what had just happened. Whilst driving up to Saint Louis, on the way up, we passed an empty car which had a heavy police presence around it. We arrived at my mom's place where all the family had gathered around. That awful woman, Lina Bonlam, was there loitering around and was chased away by one of my brothers. She also had previously been seen a few times following us at La Louise, where we lived, Hassan and myself and the children. Shortly after arriving at Saint Louis, a man named Jackson Paulby, he's in Australia now, showed up barefooted and asked if he could hear if he had heard what had happened. He asked to use the toilet and left straight away. He was a terrible bloke, that one. Anyway, that night, with the help of my friend next door, we visited every corner of Mahé looking for Hassan, just hoping that maybe he might have been on the beach somewhere, been thrown, you know. You've got to do something. You can't just sit down doing nothing. A few days later, while I got back to work, I was working then for Mackenzie Dalgety on Newport. That Jackson Paulby showed up at my working place at Mackenzie and said to me, Nordver had arrived and that you, Carlette, should go clear the goods. If I didn't have people here, I might say something bad, but I won't. I said, listen, I said, with all your lies, you have thrown Hassan in the ditch somewhere. Now, all of a sudden, you start looking, things to me. Now you want me to go to Norway, that is things from Africa, bringing goods for the Seychelles or whatever. I said, no. I said, I'm not Hassan at all. Anyway, I replied, with all my lies, you have dropped Hassan in it. Now you are trying to do the same to me. I'm not interested. If you are not gone within 10 minutes, I shall call the police. And I never saw him again to this day. I saw the picture on Facebook that is in Australia. I can kill that bloke. On the 29th April 1978, on that day, 2 policemen turned up at my place of residence at La Louise. Bill Mohammed, one of our best friends in the house, in the what to call this place?
Police force.
Police station, with an arrest letter signed, I won't be able to mention his name properly, but signed by Albert René. I had to take my 2 sons with me to the central police station. This one was at his friend overnight. They always do that, these boys from wherever they are, like to stay with each other. Upon arriving there, I called my mom, who sent my sister to collect the 2 boys that were with me at the station. It's awful, just small children being, My eldest boy was with a good friend of mine at the time and was taken back to Saint Louis to be with the other 2. I was taken to James Pillay, the police commissioner, who started interrogating me. I had nothing to say to him, but I did recollect saying, if you people are so scared of your own shadows, why did you take the country? He didn't answer. I was transferred later that night to the prison at English River above the radio station. A few prisoners had been arrested earlier, where in some of the cells and others were outside, as it was full up with arrestees. There were a few women all mixed with men, because there's no other way. Much later in that night, the women were taken down and put in our own cells. I recollect the names of those in the cell next to me. I had Andiana Waro, may her soul rest in peace, my good friend, Winnie Adlin, and Marie-Ange Lavie, married to an American, and then she went away quickly after she was released. During our stay in prison, we were visited by some Australian observers. Is it in there? No, maybe, anyway. I can honestly say, most of the time, the food we got was not very nice. And on occasion, we came across dead cockroaches in it. It was awful. During our stay there were sympathetic officers who took pity on us and turned a blind eye to food being brought from outside. During my 3 months staying at the prison, I found it hard to cope as I was missing my 3 boys who were constantly on my mind. Father died, and now I'm in prison, and always wondering what had happened to her son. My sister Anuta, on one occasion, brought me some clothes, and my eldest lad, this one, accompanied him. The kind lady officer, very nice one, who was looking after us, allowed me to see my son through the keyhole of the door. But he couldn't see too much, could you? Because it was very small, whereas I could see, but he couldn't. I noticed that he was trying to look out for me, but for no avail. This is what makes me angry. Upon witnessing what had just taken place, one of the other prisoners cried out loud. It was a very painful experience. That night, I suffered from a nervous breakdown and was transferred to the Victoria Hospital, where I stayed for a couple of weeks. I'm not going to say Mr. I can't. René refused the request by the doctor for my two boys to visit me whilst I was in the hospital, because the doctor asked for me, for my children to come, because I was in a bad way. But he didn't. He refused. The doctor took it upon himself to allow me to see my kids as I was in a bad way. That allowed me to have some comfort. Following my stay in hospital, I was placed under house arrest, the duration of which I can't remember. My good friend Adriana Hooper had to get special permission to come to visit me at St. Louis before she left for exile in the UK. I went to live, I can't live in my own home now because my mom wouldn't allow it, because I was on my own with the children. I went to live with my brother, Ken, so we had to split the children. But the house was big at St. Louis for the tall. Everything is for the family. So they got rooms there, where we all stayed with my mom, thought that it was best to keep an eye on us. Life carried on for a while with me having to cope as best as I could. I wasn't getting anything from anybody apart from my mom, and then where I used to work, that was good. I kept my job. 15th November 1979, I was arrested for the second time while staying at St. Louis with my parents. When I got back from work in the afternoon, the same decree was given by Alberini. They sent two officers in a mini-mock who took me to the Central Police Station again in front of my two sons. This one was always with the other son, but it doesn't matter, it's something for him. I decided to wear my red dress and blue dress for that occasion. Upon arriving at the police station, the French consulate, I think it was Jacques Chevalot, commented on my dress, quote, "J'aime ta robe." Of course, I replied with a big smile, quote, "C'est ma couleur préférée." And then I was taken up to see James Pillay, the Commissioner of Police, with an anger. He asked me to sit down. And I picked up the chair and slung it right across and said, "Encore? which means again, I'm going again. He said something that was quite strange. Quote, "Tonight, if there is a disturbance, I'm going to leave your cell door open and you do whatever you have to do." So therefore, my life was in my hand. Next morning, we were transferred to English River again. You see, these people, they are always afraid of their own shadows, so a very little thing like that, then they kill you or whatever they do. Next morning, we were transferred to English River again. This time, my one of cellmates included my best friend, Mary Shopey. She wanted to come, but she's not too good. I'm going to see her in 2 days' time anyway. We were detained for another 3 months of my life as an innocent. This resulted in me missing another Christmas with my boys. This was hard to take. Upon my release, James Pillay told me that I had to leave the country or suffer the same fate as Hassan. When I asked about Hassan, he never answered. I started sending correspondence to Amnesty International containing details of my ordeal that we were going through. I left the Seychelles in July 1980, headed for the UK, where I applied for political asylum. But unfortunately, I was not allowed to take the children with me at that time. They explained that to me. I said, it doesn't matter, I'll go first. I had to leave my 3 boys behind. My eldest and youngest stayed with Kenneth, that's my brother, and the others with Rosie and Luan, my brother. We split them, but in the same place. The boys who had split up for the first time, but I was always be forever grateful to my family. It took a whole year before I was granted permission to bring my kids over to the UK. Whilst in the UK, I stayed with my sister, who was a nurse at the hospital, Mrs. Antonia Harrison. She introduced me to a wonderful man by the name of Peter Ball. And we got married once the boys came over. I didn't want to do anything before the kids came. I had to restart my life all over again. But I thank the blessing of the Almighty for the strength to help me through this ordeal. Following the assassination of Gerard, we were put under the protection of Scotland Yard for a period of time. I didn't leave the UK for 11 years. I was asked to return to Seychelles by the Democratic Party to welcome Mr. James Mancam upon the return of the multi-party politics. Whilst in the UK, we reconciled with Hassan's wife and the rest of his children. This was the first time my kids had met them. One of Hassan's sons made a pilgrimage to Mecca for the benefit of Hassan. That's the way they do. That night, I had a dream where Hassan came to me and said, I have been liberated and I am with the baby. That was the best thing he could have given me. There was great comfort to me, as it meant he was at peace with my daughter, his daughter, who was stillborn. But before that, every time or every night, I'll dream of Hassan. But he won't be talking. He'll be walking about where we live, on the lawn, and so on and so forth, every time. Especially when the boys are sick. My second always had asthma, and he would be there, but I never see him. But that day, at least he spoke to me, and I believe in it till I die. Anyway, all this time, we have lived our lives with the trauma of Hassan's disappearance, which had left a large impact on his children's lives. Hassan deserved to be given a proper Muslim burial, and I am not Muslim, I'm still a Roman Catholic. He wanted me to change religion so he could marry me. I said, no, I've given you my body, I'm not giving you anything apart from that. Anyway, burial, and to finally put closure to this sad chapter of our lives. After 42 years, this is something we will never forget, and only God can forgive. I'm not forgiving anybody. And I think that's all. I don't know if you want to say something.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I suppose I best start from when Dad disappeared back on the 13th of August 1977. When on that day itself, which was about after 6 o'clock anyway, he went to drop the car at Saint Louis. One of my brothers, Jaffa, who was the second, well, he would have been the third, but the second born boy, who always went everywhere with him, was following him out of the house. And because it just started to rain, Mom stopped him and said he'll be back in about half an hour or so. Then, you know, we went back inside. My mum was sat on the chair. She loved doing embroidery. She was always doing embroidery. When the phone call came about Dad obviously not reaching Saint Louis, and what followed was we got picked up and taken back to Saint Louis. On the way, as my mum said, we stopped at Dad's family house where she went in. And on the way up to Saint Louis, we drove past the car. The door was still open, slipper on the floor, lights were still on. There was policemen around the house, around the car, and so on. And we went to Saint Louis that night, obviously with the rest of the family. I was aware there was a commotion outside, not exactly what happened. I was about 9 years old at the time. To cut a long story short, my mum got a phone call. I won't mention his name, but he got a phone call by somebody who gave him Albert René's direct phone number. She proceeded on to ring Albert, and Albert said to her, quote, "I've just heard about it, and I've instructed my Minister of Defense, which I think was Ogilvy Belwi, to look into the case," and so on. I think my mum warned her, said, if you lay a hand on her, there will be consequences. But obviously this was to no avail anyway. We went back to La Louise the next night, where my mum didn't want to leave home anyway. We went back to La Louise to stay following Dad's disappearance. And just to explain to you our neighbours at La Louise, above us was the Marigot family, and below us was the Chetty family who had a shop built there. And consequently, about 8 days later, we had a dog, which was only about 2 years old, because we only moved in 2 or 3 years old. We only moved in La Louise back in 1974. And that dog was healthy, and 8 days later we found him dead on the first step onto the front of the house. How a healthy dog would die, we don't know. But later we were to know that we were being spied upon, and that Lina Bonham was somebody that was following Dad and was always seen at the top of the house at the Marigos. The sad thing about all this thing is, you know, Seychelles was a place where everybody lived together very happily, and what happened to this country was, you know, was something that should never have happened, and it was all down to political greed and things like that. To proceed on, my mum also made an appointment to go see Albert René, where she went to State House, and it was a few days later, and she was having a talk to Albert, and one of the conversation Albert said to her, he says, "You can rest assured, the people that kidnapped Hassan is not giving him any food. You can make your own conclusion what that means." I have got some names with me which I'd like to pass to the Commission. I don't want to accuse anybody of whatever, but names of people that's potentially involved in the direct kidnapping scenario, and obviously there was and this was a potential lead, again, to do with the kidnapping of what may have happened to his body and things like that. So, what I've got to say is, my mum shielded us from a lot of pain. She was a mum and dad to us for a long time. You're always putting us first. We was never wanted for anything, nor did we ask for anything of anybody. Mom had a lot of friends that contributed in our upbringing, from me going to eat at their house when I was at Seychelles College to going on holiday with them when she was away, and so on. I would like to say my mom was a great person. She is a great person. She was our rock. As for my dad, what I remember of him, he was a kind person. Whenever anybody wanted anything, if he didn't have it within his powers, he would find a way of helping people, because that's the way he was. He certainly wasn't scared of anybody. He certainly wasn't scared of Albert René, because that was in his nature. When my mom went to prison, I've got to thank my aunties, uncles, for the way they looked after us. We were always in good hands, although she wasn't with us. It was very hard for us when we went to see her at the hospital when she was released, to see the state that she had become. But my mom was a strong woman. No, you couldn't put her down. It didn't take long for her to recover and carry on with her life. To this day, all I'm seeking is closure, to see where Dad's remains are, and to give him a proper Muslim burial, so we can actually bring closure to all the family from this point. I think I'll stop there, and obviously if there's no questions, please.
I mean, thank you Mrs. Bowen, thank you also for setting out your story. Was there, any ongoing police investigation into what had happened to Hassan? Were the police talking to you and asking you?
There was police investigation, and there were witnesses of what had happened. I know that obviously there is a witness that gave a statement and so on. And obviously there's a paper clipping of a potential, which I think I emailed it to you guys anyway, where it said, if I could read it out, if it's okay. The first week after the coup d'etat, they set up a security mobile patrol, and I was picking up. I was picked to be part of it. One evening during that same time, around 7 p.m., I was on my patrol motorbike coming down from Beauvallon. Excuse me. Coming down to town from Beauvallon. Coming down the road at the Wassami shop, I noticed. Sorry, it's okay. It's okay. Coming down the road at the Dorasami shop, I noticed an army jeep going past at high speed, but that was normal at that time. When I reached the bend near Mr. Gilbert Russell's house, just before you take the wider bend and go straight down, where they have now built a big building in the area of Saint-Louis d'Ambambou, I saw something strange. I saw a car parked in the middle of the road with its parking lights on. I got off my motorbike and went nearer to inspect the vehicle. I saw that the car door was slightly ajar, and there was one slipper behind the car and the other nearby. I looked at the car seat and I saw an empty bullet casing in the driver's seat. I saw bloodstains. Straight away I knew something was seriously wrong. So I called the central police station. That car belonged to Hassan Ali, who has disappeared to this day. He was not in the car when I saw it. However, a few days later, going to Mike's store at Beauvallon, I met someone whose name I shall not mention, but who, from what he said, I believe was part of what happened there. During our conversation, I mentioned Hassan Ali's disappearance and how, as yet, there was no word about his whereabouts. He answered saying, "Well, you too, if you had gotten to the scene a few seconds earlier, we would have had to take you along as well." He said this casually, but I got the message because I remember that indeed I had met an army jeep speeding away just a few seconds earlier. Hassan had been in the jeep, and whether he was dead or alive at the time, I have no idea. All I know is that bloodstain that I'd seen in the car and the empty bullet casing and the words spoken by that soldier. The disappearance started even before the coup and went on until years later. People mysteriously went missing, never to be seen again. This version is corroborated by a statement given to the police in which the writer claimed to have seen someone being dragged out of the car at exactly at the location. The car that the witness was in had driven right up behind the car of Hassan Ali was in, and someone at the scene asked the driver of the other car to go on. The witness and friends, the witness and friends underwent a very tough police questioning about what the witness had seen. Among the people the witness saw at the scene was a woman working for the state who was also rumored to have been actively following Hassan Ali in the days leading to the incident. Sources close to Mr. Ali said he had left his home around 6:20 p.m. to go to St. Louis to give the car to his girlfriend's sister. However, she phoned up about 1 hour later saying he had not yet arrived. They later got information about his car being found stranded and were left with many unanswered questions. In an interesting development, the right-hand man of Mr. Hassan Ali is said to have committed suicide the very next day.
And is that true, that the right-hand man committed suicide the following day?
He was a worker that worked with Dad. I couldn't tell you much about him. I only know him as Fred. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah. All he's got, I think, 2 or 3 boys in the army. All of them are in the army. I don't know if they're still there, but the father was not with them, so to speak. But they never talk.
Is the person you mentioned somebody called Fred Gertrude?
I think it is.
Gertrude, yeah.
Thank you.
But where was this article published?
This was published in the Life newspaper.
Long time ago.
His name is Mr. Verlak's newspaper, I think.
Seychelles Live.
Is it Seychelles Life? Is it?
Weekend Life.
Weekend Life.
Weekend, yeah.
Okay. When? Well, around the time
Around
that
the time of the...
But who was the person who was
writing it?
writing it?
I could not tell you. I've tried to do some research on it, and we've not been able to ascertain who actually did the writing. It would have been great to actually know,
yes,
but
the one on the
unfortunately-
motorbike who was
Exactly, yeah. I have done some research. Unfortunately, I've not been able to ascertain who the writer was. But I suppose at the end of the day, if anybody is listening and they know, if they can pass the name over, I'm not sure, it'll be very, very helpful.
Yeah, because clearly this person was very nearby. He saw all of that, yes.
I've got one thing that I said I might as well get it out of myself. Once I was going to the market, obviously. I took the bus, which is next to my house, and it was almost full, that vehicle, and I managed to get a seat, the last one that was left there, for instance. When I sat down, then there's a gentleman who said, "Is this Carlette?" I turned around and I said, "Yes." And then he said, "I'm sorry, Carlette." And then I got a shock. And then I looked at him, and then he just turned around like that. And then I found out that he just arrived back and from somewhere. Canada. And he was going a little bit doolally. And I was told, when I explained this to somebody else, then he said, but they said he had been, dealing with Hassan's things because he's got, what do they call this?
Could I answer? I think what my mum is alluding to is that person, which I think the name is on that, and I think the lady mentioned him as well yesterday in her testimony. I think he had some sort of a woodyard place somewhere at Mofflery, and allegedly, this is this.
You just
was Dad's body was cut up there. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. So, but it's that same person that Mrs. Morgan yesterday mentioned to the commission.
Okay, go for it. Yeah.
I think the person you're referring to, he was the son of a shareholder, and they had a company that was set up. They had a woodworking factory at Montfleury, directly opposite the cemetery.
I think so, yeah.
Next to that new building that's come up with some shops in it. And they had machinery, heavy woodworking machinery like band saws and circular saws. And that is where It wasn't actually his. He was just the son.
Yeah, I say I'm only, you know,
Yeah.
I've not really mentioned any names, so I'm just, you know, saying what obviously conspired.
Yeah. We have received information, and he has been mentioned before, but nothing conclusive so far.
Why was he targeted, do you think? Why was he targeted? Who were his friends?
No, I won't.
Well, I'll why would Dad be targeted? Well,
No.
I suppose, I mean, going, because obviously I learned more about my dad later on with stories and stuff. Why would that? Because one, he was a strong supporter of Mr. Montcalm. I know when Mr. Montcalm was in trouble, when there was like things like when there was rioting in town by the SPUPs and stuff like that, my dad took it upon himself to go collect Mr. Montcalm to take him back home. So it'll be, like I say, he was never afraid of anybody. You know, that's one thing about he wasn't afraid of people. He wasn't afraid of situation. But in saying that, he was the sort of person that would help anybody as well, you know, whether through business or whatever. So, and he certainly wasn't afraid of Albergine. So that's a fact. I do believe Uncle Ayub said something about him going to repossess a car at some point where he was the sort of person that would do something like that. You know, I mean, he that was one of his trait of life, you know. So yeah. So why was he targeted? Because yeah, I mean, he was gutted when the coup happened. I'm sure a lot of people, but he probably wasn't the sort of person that would have stand up for it either. So yeah.
One of the things that I don't know if you've mentioned it, he was also the landlord of the SPUP.
Yeah, well, that's obviously, yeah, he wasn't directly the landlord of the SPUP. His father was the landlord of directly of the SPUP, yeah. But that, you know, that obviously, that's something that is something that really maybe some of his, what I call, some of my elder brothers might be able to spend, you know, shed more light on it, because I don't know. Up till I was about 22 years old, that's when I actually met my other brothers and sisters and stuff like that. So we didn't have anything to do with any of his affairs, his buildings or anything like that. This is nothing to, you know, like I said, from my point of view anyway. So, but I'm pretty sure if one of them has a chance to come and talk about it, they can maybe shed more light on it. So that's all I can say really.
Are they here? Any of them here, or are they living overseas? His other children?
There are two sons lives here now, and obviously my
Adam
two
and
sisters.
Imtiaz.
Yeah, Adam and Imtiaz lives here. My two sisters lives up in the UK in Bolton, and Mahmoud lives in Bolton as well. My eldest brother, who I met briefly, sadly passed away a long time ago. And he was very, very much affected with Dad's disappearance as well. You know, it's got to be said. I mean, but I only knew him very, very, very briefly in his life. And upon meeting him for the first time, I could not believe the resemblance he had to my dad. Whereas my youngest brother, he's got my dad's features as well, compared to the rest of the family, really. So yeah.
We did actually receive from the National Assembly, I think, four more complaints, 4 or 5 more complaints from members of the family. We did reach out to them, contact them on the details we had. Only two responded, I believe. Yeah, because we did want them to know, and because we hadn't received authorization to move forward with their cases from them.
I know one of my sisters, I was in contact with her last night, said she will be writing some sort of a statement to the Assembly, to the Commission, so whatever she puts in there, you know, might shed some light into things, so that's about it. So.
And I just had a question about Jackson Polway asking you to go and clean the goods. What? Can you explain that to me? What?
I wish I knew what
Oh,
Nordwehr was bringing. No, I don't know. But the thing is, when he came to the office, and he said, Nordwehr has arrived, you better go to clear the goods. I was shocked myself. I said, and then it clicked me. I said, listen, I said, you've done a lot of dirt on Hassan. He's dead now. Now you want me? I said, no way. That's when I told him, I said, if you do not leave these premises, I'm going to call the police. And I've never seen again.
But you also said that on the day that all this incident happened, he came to your house and went and used the toilet. I mean, did he used to come to your house?
No.
Well,
I was shocked because that house where I said my house is Mom's house and blah, 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 that's where we were.
Yeah.
No, and out of the blue,
he just turned up.
And he didn't even have shoes, which means he must have been doing some, I don't know.
But you knew him. You knew him as someone who sort of hung around in the area?
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
I think now and again Hassan has been talking to him. You know, Hassan is like that. He likes to speak like that. Either even if he doesn't like the person, he doesn't think to say, "Oh, I won't say that," and so on and so forth. So maybe that's how he got to sort Hassan. You see, but when that day he came, because he used to, so I was told, live at the end of what is it called? Béolier. At night, no shoes. Where do you come from? Because that's what happened. Because when he came in, no shoes on, and then he says, I've just heard, and I pretended as though I didn't hear, and then he says, can I borrow the toilet? And then I said, yo, go, and then finish, and then he went. He says, oh, he was on a mission, but what sort of mission would he be?
But did he have a reputation as a bit of a spy or what?
No, I haven't heard anything, because ever since that day, I haven't seen him, apart from when he said, when he came do this and so on,
Strange.
Jackson Paul Louis. Yeah, he's in Australia.
And
didn't you have some relatives around the Bovalo area?
Yes, yeah.
Connection with the Chang Him family?
It might be, because I remember when the father was still alive, he had a big place there on top. That's where they lived.
Maybe we saw something. I mean, from this newspaper article, it appears that the army is possibly involved, which would not be surprising given that most of the complaints that have been alleged involve army or state security services, the two working together.
I think I know that obviously there was investigations in terms of police files and stuff, but it's like you guys have you know, you're hitting a brick wall every time you're asking for files because everything allegedly moved to State House, and whatever moves to State House, maybe some cockroaches ate it all, you know what I mean? It just disappears.
Yeah, it's very difficult to get to the... So, I mean, to talk to... What we've been trying to do now is identify police officers and talk to them, and we've been successful in some cases. So we're trying that way, so any police officers that worked on this case...
I think one of the information I gave you is a police officer that last year, I think, when my mum went to Prale, and he was the lead investigator and allegedly on the case.
So he can be very helpful. But what we also, I mean, the pattern we've been seeing is that the police were subordinate to the army, right? So the police could only do what they were allowed to do in a way, in terms of investigations.
Well, that's that was Seychelles as it's changed, isn't it? Everything was controlled from State House and whatever, isn't it? You know, that's what happens when there's no discipline. Everything runs by thugs, isn't it? So you can't expect much, can you?
When you were interrogated, when you were arrested and interrogated, what were you interrogated about?
What have you been doing, you know, like, because I used to go dancing with my friend, so it's like something that you shouldn't do, so to speak. What else can I do? Mary, Shopie, and myself, all the girls, we go there. They always want to know what we're doing, but we just go there. We went dancing, that's it. And then I took them back home to their place, but there was no problem. I didn't think that it was a disease for me not to go to the dance with my friends.
But you also said that it seemed your place was being watched.
Yes.
That there was this lady.
That is.
But for what purpose? I mean, what do you think?
I have no idea. That is why my mum, because my house was at La Louise, my mum then told me, no, you're not going there again. You come home. So I didn't. During the day, I'll pop round and things like that, but the rest of the day, I just stayed with Mum.
But it was your mum's house that was being watched?
Oh, yes, Mum. That Lina Bonlam, the woman who lives above myself is her big friend. So every time, no matter what time it is, she's there.
At La Louise.
That was at La Louise. Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Oh, you see.
As for Saint-Louis, we don't. Saint-Louis was the way Saint-Louis, the family was at Saint-Louis. My grand's house was there. My aunt.
Yeah, everybody
was in that area because obviously she had big properties there anyway. So.
So it was all family.
House. It's a family place.
And Saint-Louis was a place, to be honest, because the way the family structure was, in a sense, especially when Granddad was alive and some of the brothers, you didn't mess with.
Yeah, you don't mess with us.
Probably gathered with Auntie Jules when she came here. You know, it wasn't so. We didn't, people didn't mess with us because obviously my granddad was very well respected. He was in the police force and he helped build the road and at Saint Louis, supervised building the road at Saint Louis at the time and so on. So he was, and we were a well respected family. I mean, what the coup did was break up a lot of that. To be fair. But when we're together, we always had a laugh. So.
Seychelles.
And in terms of Hassan's friends, did they come and see you afterwards? Did they try and find out what had happened to him, or
Hassan's friends?
Yeah.
No, I don't think anybody came.
I think
because I was with Hassan. He left his wife for me, so there's always something.
Yeah.
But then, in the end, we all got, we okay. Hassan's wife, we talked and things like that. And after she went to Mecca, she invited me when I was in UK, and this like that. We became friends.
I think a lot of his true friends were supportive in a sense. Again, I don't really want to name names, but I used to go stay with one of his best friends at weekends or holidays and stuff like that. So we had a lot of support. Mom had a lot of friends anyway, so we had a lot of support. When we lived at La Louise, for instance, I used to get a lift to go to the Seychelles College in the morning. I used to go through one of
Achilip.
Yeah, well, Achilip was the one I stayed with, and I used to go eat at my Auntie Rachel's place at Moffley and stuff like that at lunchtime. and so on. So we're all right. You know, we had a lot of support. All I would say is that I always think the burden that you know, I had my shoes that I walked in and whatever, you know, it was a burden for us, but the burden my mum's shoes that she walked in was a hell of a lot more than what we were. You know, she shielded us from a lot of pain and stuff like that. But obviously, as you know, when you're 9, 10, 11 years old, you're learning, and obviously when these traumatic times happens, for me, I've had to probably grow up faster than what I should have done, and instead of enjoying childhood, we went through a bit of trauma. But what the Commission has shown me personally is that I wasn't alone, because a lot of people have come sit around this table and telling stories that even I am thinking, you know, whoa, you know, it just shows you how fractured this place came because of people's greed. You know, one man's, you know, that's all he can put it down to, really. Because at the end of the day, if things had just been left the way it is, which it hasn't, because I don't live life by ifs and buts and whatever, you know, maybe he would have been elected properly and whatever. I don't know. I don't know. But this is never going to happen. We'll never know. I suppose what the Commission probably can achieve is maybe a more balanced history of the Seychelles, that is not weighted down on one side or the other. That's all I can really put, really, in that sense.
I mean, it's certainly complicated, you know, and it's certainly surprising, you know, what happened, you know, what happened and how so little of it was addressed, or nobody knows.
No. Either they know and they don't want to talk about it.
They don't want to talk about it, that fear, you know, but now it's time to come forward.
Exactly.
You know, it really is. So we've been calling people to come forward. I mean, to know what happened in this case, I think would be very important, to know where the remains are.
Yeah.
So that you could give the proper burial and say goodbye. It's, you know, for you, I mean, I think for the Seychelles to know what happened is very important, as you know, more important for you as a family, but I think for the country to know what happened, to know what people were doing. Yeah. I mean, we are becoming aware, right? So we may not have conclusive evidence at this stage, but people are giving us information. We are receiving information. The same names are coming up time and time again and being placed where these events occurred. You know, and it's not people that have gotten together in this country. You know, it's different stories, different events, but similar patterns. So we are becoming aware, you know, of who we believe is responsible. So, and I think those people know, because of course we're telling them as we go along. Some we are still gathering before we alert them. They know. So they need to think about what their position is now and what they're going to do. And I think one thing that resonated with me yesterday that President Michel said is you have to stop saying you're either with us or you're not, right? It's the end of that.
Yeah, right.
But, you know, I mean, if people really believe that, because if he believes that, he's no longer with you, right? So if you were being protected because you were with them, that protection's gone. And my sense is these people that were carrying out tasks at the behest of the leadership may not be so safe anymore because they're not useful in a new climate of change. They're not useful, you know, so it's in their interest actually to come forward now, right? You know, they're not useful.
This will be remain to be seen, isn't it? I mean, I can only, you know, from my point of view is that I don't, you know, I don't really know what to say. I mean, it's something like for me, like, what I can relate to is that some of the sufferings that other people has gone through and so on. And me personally, obviously, I'm going to speak on behalf of. We're not looking, you know, it's too late to, if people think we're seeking revenge, that time has passed because the the culprit is in a concrete grave somewhere, isn't it? So, at the end of the day, we just want closure. We've not come here for anything else but closure,
The complainants that have come before us are so dignified, in my view. They come forward, they have these painful stories, they put them out. They must be hitting something, unless, we're dealing with psychopaths, yeah, that's the danger, right? But then,
I'd like to say just one little thing about my dad, really, is that he, for me, when I sit back and think, he's left what I call a legacy behind him. In a sense, all of his children are very successful. His grandchildren, which unfortunately he has never got to meet, a lot of doctors, scientists, accountants, all of them very, very, very successful. With most of them has got what I call university education, and a lot of them has got children of themselves. And from that point of view, I always think of Seychelles, because Seychelles is my home, and unfortunately a lot of them lives abroad, and it's abroad that's benefiting from their services and so on. When you're trying to build a country with professionals and whatever, it's here I feel you're importing a lot, and so on. So, but I'm pretty sure the country will get there in the end. Where it needs to be. And where it's heading, which I think it's heading in the right direction anyway. From that point of view, with the political change and climate that's happening here. So all I can do is wish the people of Seychelles the best. This is my home. It's always been my home. I've lived in England for most of my life, but Seychelles is my home. I've come back here so many times. After '93, I think I started coming back. So that's where we are, really.
Okay, bonjour. Madame Paul, bonjour.
Hello. Yeah.
As from the file we got from the National Assembly, I see a lot of progress from your complaint.
Yeah.
Today we are not talking about any financial compensation. I'm very glad to see that, because no money can replace the life of somebody.
Yeah.
So from your previous form, you said we want financial compensation, but today I don't see that. Your heart has changed a lot. I want to say thank you for that, because money will not bring Hassan back.
No, it won't be done.
Maybe we can think about other things to honor him. It can be anything to glorify him. It can be a road in Seychelles, Hassan Ali Road, or something to remember him. Those kind we are thinking about, people can stay forever. He's talking about legacy. That's historical thinking. So we think, yes, you were talking about financial compensation in your file, but today I don't see that. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So we had heard about you a lot before we actually met you. So it's been a real pleasure to meet you, and thank you for talking publicly and telling people about your story. And we are committed to finding out what happened. We do have some leads. You've given us some other leads. People have been telling us stuff. It's just getting them on the record. And that's a process of negotiation, but we're just at the beginning of our, we started in August, right? So we're just at the beginning. And I think as time goes on, people will come forward. All those leads you've given us, we will follow up. We will send suspect notifications to those that you've identified as being involved, and then the witnesses, we will contact them. So you might hear your case being called, so because we will continue to schedule it in January and in February and March. So you might hear case 005, your name, right, coming up.
Okay.
But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope we can find out what happened and give you closure. Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you. Yes,
Yeah, we'll keep
thank
you informed. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Okay, we will adjourn now and we will resume at 11 a.m. with our next witness. Thank you.
All rise.